Hello Year 2, it's Father Robin here. It's wonderful to be able to join you today. I know in RE you're looking at the Lord's Prayer, the Our Father, and so Mrs. Ahmed asked if I'd do a little video to help you explore the background of the Our Father, the Lord's Prayer. Let's say you were learning something new. Let's say Mrs. Ahmed was teaching you how to draw a square. She might say, you need to draw 4 lines of the same length that are each the same angle from each other. And so you might think, I know how to do that. I'll do 1 line there, and 1 line there, and 1 line there, and 1 line there. And you might say, Mrs. Ahmed, I've tried to draw a square, but it's not very square-like. And you'd then say, please could you show me how? And Mrs. Ahmed might come, or Mrs. Pierce, and they would come and show you that if you draw your square like this, then that's how it looks. And you then have that as an example. And you can use that example as the basis for future squares that you can draw. That could be small squares or big squares, but each of them will be based back onto that example that you'll remember in your mind that Mrs. Ahmed drew for you. The disciples were Jesus' students. That's actually what disciples means, followers of and students of a person. So you could be called the disciples of Mrs. Ahmed. Jesus was teaching his disciples to pray, giving them instructions on how to do it. But they were still a bit confused. They wanted an example to help them understand how they could pray like he did. So finally, when they said, teach us to pray, Jesus gave them an example, a prayer which we now call the Lord's Prayer, because it was Jesus's, our Lord's. But also we sometimes call it the Our Father, because the first 2 words are Our Father, who art in heaven. It's now a prayer said by Christians in every language in the world, in every place in the world. It isn't the only prayer we say. Jesus didn't say, this is the prayer you must always use and no others. He said, pray like this. It's like a model. We say prayers that are longer and shorter. Each of them has a lot of the same elements that are in the Lord's Prayer. But it is also a prayer that Jesus gave us. It's a good outline, but it's also such a fantastic prayer. We do use it and put a certain importance on using it all the time. Many Christians memorize the Lord's Prayer. They say it every day, perhaps when they get up or when they go to bed, or when they come to a church to light a candle for a friend. I use the Lord's Prayer in almost every service that I take. It's seen as a staple, a necessary thing to include when we're praying to God. But where does the Lord's Prayer come from? And more importantly, perhaps, what is it about? Well, Jesus' teaching the Lord's Prayer to his disciples appears in the Gospel of Luke and the Gospel of Matthew, who we have a depiction of here. And what is it about? Well, there's lots of different sections of it, and so I'm going to go through those step by step with you now. There's also some words that we don't usually use when we're talking to our friends. So I'm going to try and help you understand what those are as well. First of all, the introduction. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. This is like addressing a letter. It's who we're praying to. So we're praying to our Father, who art. Art means not that you're drawing something, but it's an old word for is. So our Father who is in heaven. So we're talking to God. Hallowed be thy name. Thy means yours. So and hallowed means holy. So holy is your name above all others. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Thy again means yours, so it's your kingdom come and your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. If we think about what God's kingdom is like, we think of a place where everybody knows that they're loved, where nobody is hungry, and everybody is looking out for and caring for each other. And so what we're doing is we're asking God to make this world like that, like how we imagine heaven to be, a place where we know we are loved and safe and where everyone is looking for and caring for each other. Give us this day our daily bread. Jesus talks about being the bread of life, because just as we need bread to live, we need to eat to live, we also need God's love, God's care to sustain us and help us to live and to grow. And so in this part of the prayer, we're asking God to give us all the good things we need to live and to flourish. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. We tend to think about trespassing as going into somebody's garden when we haven't been given permission. But really, the best way to understand what we mean when we talk about trespass is missing a target or missing the mark. So if I take my bow and arrow and I fire. So like this arrow which missed its target, when we trespass is when we miss the target which Jesus sets for us, which is to live the way he calls us to, loving our neighbours as ourselves. And so we need to ask forgiveness because we realise we've not lived up to that expectation. And as we ask for forgiveness for ourselves, we also realise that there are cases where other people haven't lived up to that standard when living with us, and we need to forgive them for when they've missed the mark too. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Having asked for God's forgiveness, we then ask God to help us avoid being tempted to make mistakes and do things wrong again in the future, and ask God to protect us from all the things that might harm us. For thine is the kingdom, the power and the glory forever and ever. The early church actually added this ending to the prayer which Jesus taught us, because just as Jesus had begun the prayer by praising God, they wanted to end it by praising and glorifying God again. Now that we've had a look through the prayer together, why don't we use it the way it's intended, by saying it together? Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Well, Year 2, I hope you found that helpful. I wonder if there's any parts of the Lord's Prayer that you find particularly important for you, or perhaps if there's any prayers that you remember and say yourself, that you've memorized, that are important to you or your family. Well, either way, I hope it was helpful, and I hope that I can see you again soon. But for now, goodbye and God bless.